The rain came down in sheets, turning downtown Atlanta into a blur of headlights and panic. Grace Mathew pressed her hand against her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick as she stumbled toward the black sedan idling at the curb. 32 weeks pregnant. 16 hours into a double shift. 3 minutes until she collapsed from exhaustion. The car door opened like salvation. She didn't check the license plate. Didn't verify the app. She just fell into the back seat, slammed the door, and exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. Silence. Not the comfortable kind. The expensive kind. Grace's eyes adjusted slowly. The interior wasn't cloth. It was leather that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The dashboard glowed a custom gold, and the air smelled like sandalwood and power. She looked up at the rearview mirror and froze. The driver wasn't scrolling his phone. He was staring directly at her. No, not a driver. The man in the front seat wore a suit that cost more than her car. His face was angular, beautiful in that untouchable way that made people nervous. Black hair pushed back. Eyes that calculated everything. Korean. Maybe early 30s. Utterly still. Jin-Yee. Grace didn't know his name yet, but she would. He turned slowly in his seat, studying her with the kind of attention that made her skin prickle. His gaze dropped to her belly, then back to her face. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, the kind of calm that preceded disasters. You're in the wrong car. Grace's heart hammered. She reached for the door handle. His next words stopped her cold. But maybe not by accident. Cut to black. Before we dive into how Grace Mathew's life unraveled in the back of a billionaire's car, hit that subscribe button. This story gets darker, hotter, and way more complicated than you think. Drop a comment if you've ever gotten into the wrong car, and let me know if Grace should run or stay. Now let's see how one mistake turned into the scandal that broke the internet. Grace yanked the door handle. Locked. Her pulse spiked. Outside, the rain pounded harder, and through the tinted windows, she could see shapes moving. Lots of them. People with cameras. Microphones. The flash of lightning revealed what she'd walked into. A media circus. They weren't waiting for her. They were hunting him. Let me out, Grace said, her voice steady despite the panic clawing at her throat. Jin-Yee didn't move. If you step out now, they'll photograph you. By morning, you'll be headline news. I don't care about your headlines. You will. The confidence in his voice made her want to punch him. Or scream. Or both. Grace pressed her hand against the window, and immediately, a camera flashed. Through the rain-streaked glass, she could see a reporter gesturing wildly at the car. Another one lifted their phone, already typing. Jin-Yee sighed, a sound that carried an unsettling mix of resignation and amusement. Too late, he said softly. Within 30 minutes, Grace's face was everywhere. The photos were grainy but damning. Pregnant woman, clearly exhausted, climbing out of Jin-Yee's car in front of the Ritz-Carlton. The headlines wrote themselves. Pregnant nurse linked to billionaire scandal. Mystery woman emerges from Jin-Yee's car during investigation. Who is she? Grace found out about it in the hospital locker room the next morning. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Text messages from coworkers. Emails from strangers. A missed call from her supervisor. She clicked on the first article and felt her stomach drop. There was her face, pixelated but recognizable, next to a photo of Jin-Yee at some gala, looking untouchable in a tuxedo. The article didn't say she was pregnant. It said she was involved. The comments section was a cesspool. Gold digger. Homewrecker. Look at her. She planned this. Grace's hands shook. She hadn't planned anything. She just wanted to go home. Now her name was being dragged through the internet by people who didn't know her. Didn't care. By noon, hospital administration had placed her on administrative leave. Pending investigation, they said. For her safety, they said. Grace knew what it really meant. Liability. They didn't want her face associated with their NICU while a billionaire scandal played out in real time. She sat in her car in the parking garage, staring at her phone. The baby kicked, a hard jab against her ribs. Grace pressed her hand there, tears blurring her vision. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to be invisible. Safe. Just another overworked nurse trying to survive. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But something made her swipe. Ms. Mathew. That voice. Calm. Controlled. Infuriating. We need to talk. I don't need anything from you, Grace snapped. Perhaps. But you need something from the situation I've created. A pause. And I have a solution. I don't want your solution. I want my life back. Then meet me. One conversation. If you walk away after, I won't contact you again. Grace wanted to refuse. She should have refused. But the truth was, she couldn't afford this. The damage was done. Her reputation, her job, her peace. All gone because she'd been too tired to check a license plate. She closed her eyes and hated herself a little for what she said next. Where? The address he gave her was in Buckhead. Of course it was. The kind of neighborhood where the security guards wore suits and the lawns looked like golf courses. Grace's beat-up Honda felt obscene pulling up to the gate. The guard checked his tablet, nodded, and waved her through without a word. The driveway curved upward, revealing a glass-and-steel mansion that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Correction. It probably had been in a magazine. Grace parked, grabbed her purse, and walked to the front door before she could change her mind. It opened before she knocked. A woman in her 50s, sharply dressed, gestured her inside without smiling. Ms. Mathew. This way. The interior was worse. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Minimalist furniture that probably cost more than her student loans. Art on the walls that she recognized from a documentary she'd watched once. Grace followed the woman through the house until they reached a glass-walled office overlooking the city. And there he was. Jin-Yee stood with his back to her, hands in his pockets, staring out at Atlanta like he owned it. Maybe he did. You came, he said without turning around. I'm here for one conversation. Then I'm gone. He turned, and Grace hated how striking he was. It would have been easier if he'd been forgettable. But no. He looked like someone who could ruin your life and make you thank him for it. He gestured to a chair. Grace didn't sit. Ms. Mathew, I'll be direct. The media has connected you to a story they don't understand. My foundation is under investigation for medical acquisitions tied to a hospital merger. It's complicated, mostly exaggerated, and entirely legal. But optics matter. You stepping out of my car made you part of that narrative. I didn't ask to be part of anything. No, but you are. He moved closer, not invading her space, but close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. He looked polished, but there were cracks. I can fix this. But it requires your cooperation. I don't want your money. I'm not offering money. I'm offering legitimacy. Grace frowned. Jin-Yee pulled a folder from his desk and handed it to her. Inside were printed proposals, contracts, legal documents. She scanned them, her confusion growing. You want me to work for you? As an independent medical ethics consultant. Publicly. My foundation needs oversight. You need a reason to have been in my car that isn't scandalous. We reframe the narrative. You weren't caught in a scandal. You were recruited to reform one. Grace stared at him. You're insane. I'm practical. This is manipulation. Yes. He didn't even blink. But it's also your best option. Grace wanted to throw the folder at his face. Instead, she flipped through it, her mind racing. The contract was detailed. Salary, benefits, full transparency clauses. Access to internal files. Decision-making authority. It was almost too good. Which meant it wasn't. What's the catch? She asked. You'll have to be seen with me. Galas. Press events. Public appearances. It has to look real. It's fake. It's strategy. Grace laughed bitterly. You think people will believe I just happened to be consulting for you the night I got in your car? They'll believe what we tell them to believe. I control the narrative in my world, Ms. Mathew. Let me control this one. She should have said no. Should have walked out. But the baby kicked again, and Grace thought about the bills piling up. The administrative leave that might become permanent. The apartment lease she couldn't afford to break. She hated him for being right. She hated herself for considering it. I want full transparency, she said finally. Complete access to every file, every meeting, every decision. I won't be a puppet. Agreed. And if I find anything unethical, I walk. Publicly. Jin-Yee's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Agreed. And you don't touch me. Ever. This is professional. I wouldn't dare. The way he said it made her pulse skip. Grace ignored it. She signed the contract before she could change her mind, her handwriting shaky. Jin-Yee watched her, something unreadable in his expression. Welcome to the chaos, Ms. Mathew. The press release went live the next morning. Grace Mathew, esteemed NICU nurse and medical ethics advocate, joins Jin-Yee Foundation as independent consultant to oversee hospital acquisition transparency and patient care standards. The comments section exploded again. But this time, the tone shifted. Some people were skeptical. Others were cautiously impressed. A few actually defended her. It wasn't perfect. But it was better than yesterday. Grace returned to the hospital to clean out her locker. Her supervisor, Dr. Patel, caught her in the hallway. The older woman's face was a mix of concern and curiosity. Grace, I saw the news. It's not what you think. Is it ever? Dr. Patel smiled sadly. For what it's worth, I hope you know what you're doing. Grace didn't. But she nodded anyway. By the time she left the hospital, her phone was buzzing with interview requests. Reporters wanted her story. Jeannie's assistant, the same sharp woman from the mansion, sent her a schedule. First appearance, Friday night. Charity gala. Black tie. Grace stared at the email and wondered what the hell she'd gotten herself into. The dress arrived on Thursday. Not from a store. From a designer whose name Grace had only seen in Vogue. It was midnight blue, elegant, and tailored perfectly to accommodate her belly. A note was tucked inside the box. Simple. And signed. You'll be magnificent. Grace wanted to hate it. But when she tried it on, she looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. She looked powerful. Expensive. Like someone who belonged in Jin-Yee's world. It terrified her. Friday came too fast. A car picked her up at 7. Not Jin-Yee. A driver. Grace climbed in, her heart hammering. The gala was at the Fox Theater, and when they arrived, the red carpet was swarming with cameras. Grace's stomach churned. The driver opened her door, and she stepped out into the flashing lights. She'd barely made it 3 steps when she heard his voice. Ms. Mathew. Grace turned. Jin-Yee stood at the edge of the carpet, hands in his pockets, looking like he'd stepped out of a fantasy. Tailored black suit. Hair perfectly styled. But it was the way he looked at her that made her breath catch. Not possessive. Not calculating. Just seeing her. You clean up well, she said, trying to sound unimpressed. You're radiant. He offered his arm. Grace hesitated, then took it. His arm was solid under her hand, and the warmth of him was unsettling. They walked the carpet together, cameras exploding around them. Jin-Yee leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. Smile. They're watching. I know. They're also wondering if I'm the father. Grace stumbled. Jin-Yee caught her smoothly, his hand on her lower back. The touch was brief but electric. She glared at him. That's not funny. It's inevitable. His expression was maddeningly calm. Let them wonder. Speculation keeps them interested. Grace wanted to argue, but they were already inside. The ballroom was stunning. Crystal chandeliers. A string quartet. Tables draped in white linen. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Grace felt like an imposter. Jin-Yee guided her to their table, his hand still resting lightly on her back. She hated how natural it felt. The night blurred. Introductions. Handshakes. Smiles that didn't reach eyes. Everyone wanted to know about her. How did you meet Jin-Yee? What made you join the foundation? Are you excited about the baby? Grace answered carefully, sticking to the script they'd rehearsed. But halfway through dinner, she excused herself. She needed air. The bathroom was empty, and Grace leaned against the sink, gripping the cool porcelain. Her reflection stared back at her. She looked elegant. Composed. Like someone who had it together. It was a lie. The door opened. A woman walked in, older, polished, dripping in diamonds. She stopped when she saw Grace, her smile sharp. You must be Grace Mathew. I am. I'm Helen Cartwright. I sit on the foundation board. She moved to the mirror, reapplying lipstick. You've caused quite a stir. That wasn't my intention. Of course not. Helen's smile didn't waver. But intentions don't matter. Results do. Tell me, Ms. Mathew, do you actually believe Jin-Yee hired you for your ethics? Or are you just another pretty piece in his collection? Grace's jaw tightened. I believe he hired me because I'm good at my job. How refreshing. Helen capped her lipstick, turned, and studied Grace like a specimen. Word of advice. Jin-Yee doesn't let people close unless they serve a purpose. Figure out yours before you get hurt. She left before Grace could respond. Grace stared at the closed door, Helen's words echoing in her mind. She returned to the table, and Jin-Yee glanced up. Something in her expression made him frown. What happened? Nothing. Grace. The way he said her name, quiet and concerned, made her chest tighten. She sat down, suddenly exhausted. Someone just reminded me I'm out of my depth. Jin-Yee was silent for a moment. Then he leaned closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear. You're not. You're exactly where you should be. Grace looked at him, searching for the lie. But his expression was sincere. Almost vulnerable. It made her want to believe him. And that was dangerous. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. Grace dove into the foundation's files, and what she found was complicated. Not illegal, but ethically murky. Expedited transplant partnerships. Preferential treatment for donors. Hospitals acquired and restructured in ways that prioritized profit over patients. It was legal, technically, but it wasn't right. She compiled her findings and requested a meeting with Jin-Yee. His assistant scheduled it for the following Tuesday. Grace walked into his office with a stack of printed reports. Jin-Yee was on a call, speaking rapid Korean. He saw her, held up a finger, and finished the conversation. When he hung up, he gestured to the chair across from his desk. You look serious. We need to talk about the transplant partnerships. Jin-Yee leaned back, his expression unreadable. Go on. Grace slid the reports across the desk. These partnerships prioritize donors who contribute financially to the foundation. That's not illegal, but it creates a two-tier system. People with money get faster access. People without money wait. That's not healthcare. That's commerce. Jin-Yee scanned the reports, his jaw tightening. Those partnerships fund the infrastructure that saves lives. At the cost of fairness. Fairness is a luxury in healthcare, Ms. Mathew. Someone always pays. Then make sure it's not the people who can't afford to. They stared at each other, the tension thick enough to choke on. Grace refused to back down. Finally, Jin-Yee set the reports aside and rubbed his temples. You're asking me to dismantle a system that works. I'm asking you to build a better one. And if I refuse? Then I walk. Publicly. Jin-Yee's eyes narrowed. You destroy your own credibility to make a point? If that's what it takes. Silence. Then, to her shock, Jin-Yee smiled. Not the polished, public smile. A real one. Small. Almost admiring. You're exhausting. You're immoral. And yet, here we are. Grace's heart hammered. She hated how much she liked sparring with him. Hated how his intelligence matched hers. Hated how he looked at her like she was the most fascinating problem he'd ever encountered. Jin-Yee stood, moving around the desk. He stopped in front of her, close but not touching. I'll consider your recommendations, he said quietly. But understand, Grace. Change takes time. And it costs. I know. Do you? His gaze searched hers. Because once we start this, there's no going back. People will fight us. Investors will pull out. The board will revolt. Are you prepared for that? Grace stood, forcing herself to meet his eyes. Are you? Jin-Yee didn't answer. But something shifted in his expression. Respect. Maybe something more. He stepped back, breaking the moment. I'll call a board meeting. Grace left his office feeling like she'd won something. And lost something. She wasn't sure which feeling was stronger. Over the next few days, she noticed changes. Jin-Yee started including her in meetings. Not as a consultant. As an equal. He asked her opinion. Listened when she spoke. Deferred to her on medical matters. It was unsettling. and intoxicating. They fell into a rhythm. Early morning meetings. Late-night strategy sessions. Jin-Yee worked insane hours, and Grace found herself matching him. She told herself it was dedication. But late one night, alone in the Foundation's conference room, she admitted the truth. She liked being around him. Liked the way his mind worked. Liked the rare moments when he let his guard down and she caught glimpses of the man beneath the empire. One evening, they were reviewing hospital acquisition proposals when Grace's stomach growled. Loudly. Jin-Yee looked up, amused. When did you last eat? Lunch. Maybe. He frowned. That's not acceptable. I'm fine. Jin-Yee stood, pulling out his phone. You're pregnant. You need to eat. He dialed a number, spoke briefly in Korean, and hung up. Food will be here in 20 minutes. You didn't have to do that. I did. He sat back down, his gaze softening. You're carrying a life, Grace. That matters. The sincerity in his voice made her throat tighten. She looked away, suddenly emotional. Damn hormones. When the food arrived, it was from a Korean restaurant she'd never heard of. The spread was elaborate. Bibimbap, japchae, kimchi, side dishes she couldn't name. Jin-Yee set it up on the conference table like a feast. Eat. Grace picked up chopsticks and dug in. The food was incredible. She groaned, and Jin-Yee's lips twitched. Good. Amazing. They ate in companionable silence. Grace watched him, noticing the way he moved. Precise. Controlled. But there was a gentleness when he handed her a dish. A quiet attentiveness that made her feel seen. She hated how much she liked it. Why did you really hire me? She asked suddenly. Jin-Yee paused, chopsticks halfway to his mouth. I told you. You told me the official reason. I want the real one. He set his chopsticks down, studying her. You remind me of my sister. Grace blinked. What? She died 8 years ago. Medical negligence. We couldn't afford the treatment she needed, and by the time we could, it was too late. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the pain. That's why I buy hospitals. Why I control infrastructure. Because money shouldn't determine who lives and who dies. Grace's chest ached. I'm sorry. Don't be. Just help me make it mean something. They stared at each other across the table, and Grace felt something shift. This wasn't just business anymore. This was personal. And that terrified her. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened. Not physically, but emotionally. Jin-Yee started showing up at her prenatal appointments. Not because he had to. Because he wanted to. Her doctor, Dr. Lena, raised an eyebrow the first time he walked in. And you are? Jin-Yee. I'm... He glanced at Grace, uncertain. A friend, Grace finished. Dr. Lena didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. During the ultrasound, Jin-Yee stood beside Grace, staring at the screen like it held the secrets of the universe. When the baby moved, he inhaled sharply. That's a person, Grace said softly. Yes. His voice was so raw, so full of wonder, that Grace reached out without thinking and took his hand. He looked down at their joined hands, then at her. Something passed between them. Unspoken. Terrifying. Perfect. After the appointment, they walked to the parking garage in silence. Jin-Yee stopped beside her car, hands in his pockets. Thank you for letting me come. You didn't have to. I know. He hesitated. Grace, I know this arrangement started as strategy, but it's become something else for me. Something real. Grace's heart hammered. Jin-Yee, I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. He walked away before she could respond. Grace stood there, her hand pressed against her belly, feeling the baby kick. She was falling for him. She'd been falling for weeks. And it was the most dangerous thing she'd ever done. The next major event was a foundation fundraiser in Seoul. Jin-Yee invited her to accompany him, and Grace agreed before thinking it through. The flight was first class. Jin-Yee worked most of the way, but every so often, he'd glance at her, making sure she was comfortable. When they landed, Seoul took her breath away. The city was vibrant, modern, overwhelming. Jin-Yee's penthouse overlooked the Han River, and it was even more stunning than his Atlanta home. Make yourself comfortable, he said, setting down her bag. We have a few hours before the event. Grace wandered to the windows, staring out at the city. Jin-Yee joined her, standing close enough that she could feel his warmth. It's beautiful, she said. It's home. His voice was soft. Or it was. Not anymore? Home is complicated. He turned to her. I spent years building an empire here. But I was alone. It's hard to enjoy success when there's no one to share it with. Grace looked up at him, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her ache. She reached up, cupping his face. Jin-Yee froze, his breath catching. You're not alone anymore, she whispered. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. For a moment, they just stood there, the city sprawling below them, the world held at bay. Then Jin-Yee pulled back, his expression pained. Grace, I can't. If I start, I won't be able to stop. Then don't stop. His control shattered. Jin-Yee pulled her close, his hand cradling her face, and kissed her. It was desperate. Tender. Everything she'd been denying she wanted. Grace melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. That was unprofessional, Jin-Yee said, his forehead resting against hers. Extremely. Should we do it again? Absolutely. They did. And it was perfect. The fundraiser that night was a blur. Grace stood beside Jin-Yee, feeling like she was floating. He kept glancing at her, a small smile playing on his lips. People noticed. Of course they noticed. But for once, Grace didn't care. Let them talk. This was real. And it was hers. But reality crashed back 3 days later. Grace was reviewing files when she found something that made her blood run cold. A subsidiary connected to Jin-Yee's conglomerate had expedited transplant partnerships that financially benefited elite donors. Not just preferential treatment. Actual monetary incentives. It was buried deep, hidden in legal jargon. But it was there. And it was wrong. Grace printed the files and went straight to Jin-Yee's office. He was on a call, but when he saw her face, he ended it immediately. What's wrong? Grace slammed the files on his desk. Explain this. Jin-Yee scanned them, his expression darkening. Where did you get these? That doesn't matter. Did you know about this? It's a subsidiary. I don't oversee every transaction. But you profit from them. Grace's voice shook. Jin-Yee, this isn't just unethical. It's monstrous. You're literally selling access to life-saving treatment. It's more complicated than that. It's not. She was shouting now, tears streaming down her face. You don't get to save lives and profit from them. That's not healthcare. That's exploitation. Jin-Yee stood, his jaw tight. You think I don't know that? You think I'm proud of every decision this empire makes? I inherited a system, Grace. I'm trying to change it. Not fast enough. Then help me. I am helping you. By telling you this is wrong. They stared at each other, the air crackling with tension. Finally, Jin-Yee sank into his chair, his head in his hands. You're right, he said quietly. You're right, and I don't know how to fix it. Grace's anger deflated. She moved around the desk, crouching beside him. Yes, you do. You shut it down. Publicly. You take the hit and you rebuild. It'll cost billions. Investors will pull out. The board will fight me. I know. Jin-Yee looked at her, his eyes haunted. Why are you asking me to destroy everything I've built? Because you're better than this. Grace took his hand. And because I believe in you. Something broke in his expression. He pulled her close, burying his face in her shoulder. Grace held him, feeling the tension in his body. This was the man beneath the empire. Scared. Human. Hers. But then the second blow landed. The next morning, Choi, Jin-Yee's operations director, requested a private meeting. Grace went, wary. Choi was polite, professional, and ruthless. Ms. Mathew, I'll be direct. I have information about your father. Grace froze. What? Choi slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents. Court records. Her father, Gregory Mathew, had been involved in a healthcare fraud case 15 years ago. He'd been acquitted, but the scandal had ruined him. Grace had been a teenager. She barely remembered. Why are you showing me this? She asked, her voice shaking. Because if you push this transplant issue publicly, I'll leak it. Your father's name. Your connection. It'll destroy your credibility. Grace stared at him, her mind reeling. Jin-Yee doesn't know about this. No. And he won't. Unless you force my hand. Choi leaned back. Walk away from this, Ms. Mathew. You've done enough. Enjoy your relationship with Jin-Yee. But don't ask him to burn his empire for you. Grace left the meeting feeling like she'd been gutted. She had a choice. Protect herself. Or do the right thing. That night, she told Jin-Yee everything. He listened, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. What do you want to do? He asked finally. I don't know. Yes, you do. Grace looked at him, tears blurring her vision. If I push this, I lose everything. My credibility. My privacy. Maybe even you. You won't lose me. You don't know that. Jin-Yee cupped her face, his touch gentle. Grace, I fell in love with you because you refused to compromise. Don't start now. Grace's breath caught. You love me. Desperately. She kissed him, tasting salt and fear and hope. When they pulled apart, Grace knew what she had to do. The Public Ethics Summit was held in Atlanta 2 weeks later. Media. Investors. Board members. The room was packed. Grace stood backstage, her heart hammering. Jin-Yee stood beside her, his hand on her lower back. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Yes, I do. Then I'm with you. No matter what. Grace kissed him once, then walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding. She could feel the weight of every eye on her. She stepped up to the microphone and began. Good evening. My name is Grace Mathew. For the past 2 months, I've served as an independent medical ethics consultant for the Jin-Yee Foundation. In that time, I've uncovered practices that, while legal, are ethically indefensible. She pulled up the first slide. The foundation has expedited transplant partnerships that prioritize donors based on financial contribution. This creates a system where wealth determines access to life-saving treatment. That's not healthcare. That's commerce. The room erupted. Gasps. Murmurs. Choi shot to his feet, furious. Grace kept going. I'm proposing immediate restructuring. Transparent transplant oversight. Independent audit boards. Dissolution of subsidiaries that violate patient care ethics. This will cost the foundation billions. It will anger investors. But it's the right thing to do. She looked out at the crowd and found Jin-Yee. He was standing at the back of the room, watching her. Slowly, he started walking toward the stage. The room fell silent. Jin-Yee climbed the stairs and stood beside her. He took the microphone. Ms. Mathew is correct. These practices end today. Effective immediately, I'm authorizing the restructuring she proposed. This foundation was built to save lives, not profit from them. Anyone who disagrees can leave now. The room exploded. Investors shouted. Board members argued. But Jin-Yee stood firm, his hand finding Grace's. They faced the chaos together. Later that night, they were alone in the penthouse. No press. No board. Just them. Grace collapsed onto the couch, exhausted. Jin-Yee sat beside her, pulling her close. We just made a lot of powerful people very angry, he said. I know. It'll get worse before it gets better. I know. Jin-Yee kissed her temple. Thank you. For what? For making me better. Grace looked up at him, her heart full. You did that yourself. He smiled, then knelt in front of her. Grace frowned, confused. Jin-Yee pulled out a folder. Not a ring. A contract. Equal partnership in the foundation. Your name first. Full decision-making authority. This isn't marriage. Not yet. But it's a promise. I want to build something with you. Not own you. Build with you. Grace's vision blurred with tears. She took the contract, scanning it. It was everything he'd said. And more. Yes, she whispered. Jin-Yee kissed her, slow and deep. The baby kicked hard. They both laughed, and Jin-Yee pressed his hand against her belly. Is that approval? He asked. Definitely. They sat there, tangled together, and for the first time in weeks, Grace felt peace. This wasn't the ending she'd expected. But it was the one she'd earned. Over the next few months, the restructuring was brutal. Investors pulled out. The board revolted. But Jin-Yee held firm, and Grace stood beside him. They rebuilt the foundation from the ground up, prioritizing patience over profit. It was slow, exhausting, but it worked. Grace gave birth to a daughter in May. Jin-Yee was there, holding her hand, crying when the baby took her first breath. They named her Lena, after the doctor who'd guided them through it all. And when Grace looked at Jin-Yee holding their daughter, she knew. This was home. Not the empire. Not the money. This. They got married 6 months later. Small ceremony. Close friends. Dr. Lena officiated, because of course she did. And when Jin-Yee kissed Grace, sealing the vows, the room erupted in applause. Later, at the reception, Grace stood on the balcony, watching the sunset. Jin-Yee joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Happy? He asked. Terrified, she admitted. But happy. Good. Me too. They stood there, the city sprawling below them, and Grace thought about that rainy night in Atlanta. The wrong car. The right person. The chaos that had led them here. She wouldn't change a thing. Grace Mathew didn't enter the wrong car. She entered the wrong narrative and rewrote it. Jin-Yee was feared by corporations, but transformed by one woman who refused to bend. Together, they built something better. Not perfect, but real. And that was enough. If you stayed with us till the end, drop a comment and tell us what you thought of Grace and Jin-Yee's story. Did she make the right choice? Should she have walked away earlier? Let us know. And if you loved this story, smash that like button and subscribe for more. We've got more complicated love stories, scandalous secrets, and billionaires who might just surprise you. See you in the next one. Thanks for watching.